I was just pouring tea. That's how normal it started. The kettle whistled softly, and the scent of chamomile filled my small Boston kitchen. My fingers wrapped around the handle of my favorite mug, the one David gave me for Mother's Day 3 years ago. "You're the glue that holds us together," it said. Now it sat between us like a joke no one laughed at. Julie, my daughter-in-law, sat across the table, hands folded tightly in her lap, lips pressed thin. She wasn't here for tea. She leaned in and said calmly, too calmly, "We think it's time you let us manage your bank account." My hand stopped midair. The world tilted slightly. "Why?" I asked. My voice was steady, but something in my chest cracked open. Julie didn't flinch. She looked me straight in the eye and said it, the sentence that would change everything. "You can't manage it anymore." Those 5 words hit like a betrayal wrapped in concern. I stared at her, at the girl I helped raise when her mother passed, at the woman I gave a family to, holidays to, love to, more than she ever asked for. And now, they wanted to take over everything I'd built? I looked down at my hands. Wrinkled, yes. Shaky sometimes. But those hands had written checks for every mortgage payment, had budgeted every grocery list, had nursed fevers and fixed broken faucets. Those hands raised David. And now he thought I was unfit. I asked again, softly this time. "Did David put you up to this?" She paused. That silence was confirmation enough. I tried to breathe. I couldn't. I was shaking. From shock, not age. My own son and his wife had gathered in secret and decided I was no longer capable. They were coming for my independence. I stared at her, tears rising but unfallen. "Are you trying to take everything from me?" I whispered. Julie's expression hardened. "It's for your own good." No, this wasn't concern. This was control. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a coup. They weren't offering help. They were planning a takeover. Were they going to destroy me while calling it love? I felt a chill rush through my bones, because something told me this was just the beginning. "You can't manage it anymore." That's what Julie said as she slid the bank papers across my kitchen table, like I was signing up for a magazine subscription. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. I blinked, trying to understand. "What do you mean I can't?" I asked. She smiled gently like I was a child. "You've been forgetting things. You almost paid the same bill twice last month." That was a mistake. One mistake. One. I looked down at the silver bracelet on my wrist, the one David gave me on my 60th birthday, engraved with, "You are our strength." Now his wife was telling me I wasn't even strong enough to handle my own bank account? I pushed the papers back. "I've been paying bills longer than you've been alive." Julie didn't move. "David agrees," she said. "It's not safe anymore. We talked to a lawyer." My chest tightened. "A lawyer?" I whispered. I looked around my kitchen, my home, the same place I raised my son, packed school lunches, folded laundry at 2 a.m. after my night shifts. The blue dress still hung in the hallway closet, the one I wore at David's college graduation. I kept it for special days. I thought there would be more of those. Now they were trying to strip me down to someone safe to manage. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Julie's smile faded. "We're not asking." The room went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Suffocating quiet. The kind that comes before a storm. They weren't here to help me. They were here to take over. And they'd already started. That's when I realized, this isn't about a bank account. It's about erasing me. While I'm still alive to watch, it's not just about the bank account. It never was. This is about everything I've poured into a family that now looks at me like a liability. You want to know what I've given up? Let's start with money. I used my pension to help them buy their first home. $15,000. Gone. Just like that. I never asked for it back. Never mentioned it. Not once. I paid for David's student loans when he was 23, and terrified, I told him, "Don't worry, Mama's got you." I cancelled my trip to Oregon that year, the only trip I'd ever planned for myself. That's 2 vacations I never took, 6 medical appointments I skipped to save copay money, 3 pairs of glasses I never replaced, 1 broken heater I learned to live with. I just wore layers. And time. Don't even get me started on time. Do you know how many hours I've spent babysitting, unpaid? How many nights I stayed up with their sick kids so Julie could sleep? I even missed my sister's funeral because David needed me to watch the boys while they went to a wedding out of state. I still have the dress I bought for the funeral. It's hanging in my closet. Tags still on. Black, simple, never worn. And then there's the bracelet. Silver. Delicate. David gave it to me when I turned 60. "You're the heart of this family," he wrote on the card. I keep the card in my jewelry box. Every time I look at it now, I feel like a fool. Because if I am the heart, why are they trying to cut me out? They say I'm forgetful, that I'm tired, that I need help. What they don't see, what they refuse to see, is that I've been tired for 20 years. Tired from holding everyone up, from never being allowed to fall apart, from being their constant, their comfort, their invisible safety net. They don't see the lists I still write every morning, the bills I organize, color-coded, the calendar on my fridge with every birthday, and doctor's appointment marked in ink. They only see what's convenient to see, because it makes it easier to take from me. I've kept everything. Emails, receipts, messages. Because deep down, I knew a day like this might come. And now that it has, I won't go down quietly. I tried to talk to them. I wasn't angry at first. I was hurt, confused. I thought if I just explained how much I still do, how much I still remember, they'd come to their senses. So I called David, asked if we could talk. Just the 2 of us. He didn't even come alone. Julie sat beside him on my couch, arms crossed, eyes scanning the living room like she was taking inventory. "I'm not trying to fight," I told them. "I just want to understand why you think I can't handle my own money." David didn't look at me when he spoke. "It's not about what you can't do, Mom. It's about what's best for you." Julie chimed in. "We've noticed some confusion lately. You repeated the same story twice at dinner last week. That's what this is about? A repeated story?" "I've repeated stories my whole life," I snapped. "It's called aging, not failing." Julie gave me that smile again, the one that says we've already made up our minds. It's really not up for debate. And that's when I heard the words that still ring in my ears. David said, "Mom, you're lucky we're the ones helping. Imagine if it were someone else." Lucky. Lucky to be dismissed. Lucky to be treated like a burden. Lucky to have my autonomy quietly stolen in the name of protection. I stood up, slow, deliberate, and looked them both in the eye. "I raised you, David. I taught you to walk. I held your hand during fevers, your heart after breakups. I was your mother when no one else showed up. And now, you want to turn me into a project?" He shifted in his seat. Julie stood. "You're being dramatic." My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. No, what's dramatic is trying to take away someone's rights behind their back. What's dramatic is preparing legal documents without telling me. What's cruel is calling it love. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. Because in their silence, I saw the truth. They weren't going to back down. And maybe, neither was I. The next morning, I changed the locks. I didn't tell anyone. I just called a local locksmith, watched him drill the old one out, and had him install a new deadbolt on both the front and back doors. I paid in cash. Later that afternoon, I went to the bank. In person. I asked to see the manager. I wore my nicest blouse, brushed my hair into a bun, and carried every piece of ID I owned. I sat down across from him and said calmly, "I need to remove my son from all account access, effective immediately." He blinked. "Are you sure?" "I'm not confused," I replied. "I'm protecting myself." He nodded and began the process. I closed the joint savings account, moved my funds into a private checking account under my name only. I updated my security questions, changed my online passwords, added two-step verification, and when I walked out of that bank, I felt 10 feet tall. I went home, brewed a fresh cup of tea, and sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Julie had slid those papers toward me. But this time, I felt in control. That feeling lasted exactly 24 hours. The next day, my phone rang. It was David. No greeting, no softness, just, "Why did you do that?" "I don't owe you access to my money," I said. His voice turned sharp. "You made this harder than it needed to be." "Harder for who? For him?" Julie called next. Her message was colder. "If you're going to behave like this, don't expect help from us when things get worse." When? Not if. That evening I found a note stuck in my mailbox. No envelope. Just one line, written in Julie's handwriting. "We have other ways to make sure you're safe." My hands went numb. They weren't giving up. In fact, they were escalating. Later that night, I checked my voicemail. One message stood out, from a blocked number. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. "Ms. Martin, we've been notified regarding a possible petition for conservatorship. Please contact our office to schedule an evaluation." Conservatorship? That word hit like a gavel to the chest. I turned off the lights in the house and sat in the dark for hours, gripping the silver bracelet on my wrist, the same bracelet David gave me. The irony made my stomach turn. They weren't going to stop, and if I didn't fight harder, they might actually win. It started with papers, thick white envelopes delivered to my door by a courier, not the mailman. Formal, cold. Inside, a notice of intent to petition for conservatorship, filed by David and Julie. I stood in the hallway reading the words over and over, but they didn't make sense. Not really. My name, my address. But the accusations, the implications, impaired judgment, memory lapses, unsafe financial behavior. They made me sound like I was wandering the streets talking to trees. I slammed the folder shut and felt my knees buckle. I sat on the staircase, the banister digging into my shoulder, holding the papers like they were burning through my hands. Then came the home invasion. Not with weapons, but with entitlement. David and Julie arrived unannounced 2 days later. I opened the door and barely had time to speak before David pushed past me. "We just want to find some of your medical paperwork," he said, already walking into my bedroom. I followed him, stunned. "I didn't say you could come in." Julie was opening drawers in the hallway. "I'm your son," David snapped, like that was a key to my entire life. I tried to block him. "What are you even looking for?" "Proof," he said, "so you don't embarrass yourself in court." Court. They were really doing it. Julie held up an old prescription bottle. You didn't finish this, she said with a tilt of her head. It's a mood stabilizer. Why? I couldn't even find words. I had taken that medication during a difficult grief period 10 years ago. They were digging for dirt, twisting history. And then came the blow that nearly knocked the air out of me. Julie looked at me, stone-faced. We've already spoken with the geriatric evaluator. You'll be hearing from them soon. David added, and if you fight this, Mom, the judge might think you're in denial. That could backfire. So now standing up for myself was a risk. I felt small, like the house itself was shrinking around me. My own son, who I nursed through childhood fevers, was now positioning me as unfit to function. And then, the cherry on top. Julie stepped forward and whispered, if you cooperate, this won't have to get ugly. That night I sat in the dark, clutching the silver bracelet again. The words, "You're our strength," engraved on it felt like a mockery. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a war, and I was going to need help. The day after the visit, I didn't leave my house. I barely left the couch. I sat there, curled under a blanket, tea gone cold, the court documents lying unopened on the table like landmines. The bracelet on my wrist felt heavier than ever, not like a gift, like a shackle. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I froze. I didn't want to open it. I couldn't take another confrontation. But when I finally peeked through the curtain, it wasn't David or Julie. It was a woman, late 40s, sharp suit, kind eyes. She held a folder in one hand and a business card in the other. "Ms. Martin?" she asked gently when I opened the door just a crack. "My name is Rachel Hughes. I'm with Elder Rights Advocacy Services. Someone referred your case to us anonymously." I didn't speak. I just stepped back and let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where all this began. She listened, really listened, as I poured out everything. The threats, the documents, the money, the invasion, the medications they were waving around as weapons. She took notes, asked careful questions, and when I was done, she said something I didn't expect. "You're not alone in this, and you're not powerless, but we need to act fast." Then she opened her folder and laid out a plan. Step 1, documentation. Every email, message, transaction, voicemail, prescription, bank record. She told me to keep it all. "Even the birthday cards," she said. "You'd be surprised what tone reveals." Step 2, witnesses, neighbors, church members, my pharmacist, anyone who could speak to my mental clarity and independence. Step 3, medical evaluations, but on my terms, from professionals I trust. She even helped me purchase a small voice recorder. "If they come again," she said, "record everything. This isn't just family anymore. It's a legal fight." I looked at her, eyes filled with tears I hadn't allowed to fall in. Days. "Do you believe me?" I asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "I do. And I've seen this before. Families pushing for control under the mask of care. But they're not untouchable. If we document everything, we can stop this." She stood to leave, but before walking out, she turned back and pointed to the bracelet on my wrist. "Don't take that off," she said. "Not because they gave it to you, but because you kept it. That's your story, and stories matter." For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. But it came with a chill, because Rachel had warned me. This was only the beginning. 3 days later it happened. A knock on the door. Firm, official. Through the glass I saw a woman in a government badge, clipboard in hand, expression blank. "Ms. Martin, I'm Angela Reeves. I'm a social worker assigned by the state's Adult Protective Services. I stepped aside and let her in, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear her speak. She sat across from me at the same table, the same chair where Julie had once pushed bank forms across the wood. But Angela wasn't warm like Rachel. She was clinical, neutral, careful. "I've been asked to assess your living situation," she said. "There's been a concern about your capacity to manage independently." "Concern from who?" I asked, though I already knew. She didn't answer. Instead, she took notes as she looked around. The kitchen was spotless. My calendar hung on the fridge. Every date filled in, color-coded. I'd made sure of that. She asked questions. My birth date, the current president, my medications, my bills. I answered all of them, clearly, confidently. But I could see her pen stop when I hesitated for half a second on the day of the week. Just one pause. One. Then she asked, "Have you ever forgotten to take your medication?" "Once," I said. "Months ago." She nodded, scribbled something. I asked her, "Do you ever visit the people who make these reports?" She paused. "We review all sides." I wanted to scream. All sides. I offered her a list of witnesses. My pharmacist, my neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, the pastor from church who sees me every Sunday. I handed her printed statements Rachel helped me prepare. She accepted them, but didn't say much. Then her eyes landed on the photo above my fireplace. David as a boy, holding my hand at a school play. She pointed. "Your son filed the request for conservatorship, correct?" I nodded. "Do you believe he's acting in your best interest?" I stared at her, stunned. "No," I said. "I believe he's acting in his." She didn't react, just wrote it down. When she stood to leave, she looked around once more and said, almost casually, "I'll need to speak with your family, your neighbors, and your medical providers. This is just the initial phase." Initial. So this wasn't ending. This was just the start of something much bigger. Rachel called that night. I told her everything. "Don't panic," she said. "We need more proof, stronger proof." But I could feel it already. I wasn't just fighting my family anymore. I was fighting a system that might already believe them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tried. I lay in bed for hours, the ceiling fan slicing shadows across the walls, the silence in the house louder than any argument. But the stillness felt dangerous, like something was waiting just beyond the edge of sleep. So I got up. I walked barefoot through the hall and stopped in front of my bedroom closet. I opened it slowly. The blue dress still hung there, wrapped in plastic, untouched since the last time I believed a family celebration meant something. I ran my hand over it. The fabric soft, the memory sharp. I sat down on the edge of the bed and reached into the nightstand for the bracelet. I hadn't worn it in 2 days. It had started to feel like a lie. But tonight, I just wanted to hold it. It was engraved on the inside. "You are our strength," I whispered aloud to no one in particular. Then why do I feel so weak? The tears came quietly. No sobs, just salt and breath and the ache of being unseen. I thought about my mother, how she used to sit by the window with her rosary, whispering prayers for people who never said thank you. She never asked for anything but time. Time she never got. I remembered the Christmas I spent alone while David and Julie vacationed in Florida. They called. For 2 minutes. I told them I was fine. I wasn't. I thought about the baby blanket I kept in the attic. David's first. I stitched his name into it by hand. He doesn't know that. I doubt he remembers. I've spent a lifetime building things no one remembers. And now I was being told that I had no value, unless I surrendered the very things I worked my whole life to protect. I walked to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. My reflection startled me. I looked tired. Not confused, not broken. Just tired. And then something shifted. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the weight of the bracelet in my hand. Maybe it was the face in the mirror that reminded me of who I used to be. But I heard the words in my mind, clear as daylight. I deserve to be protected too. Not controlled, not silenced. Protected. Not because I'm failing, but because I'm worth protecting. I stood there a little longer, breathing, remembering. I wasn't just fighting to keep my bank account. I was fighting to keep my story. Rachel called me early. "I need to prepare you," she said. "They've submitted witness statements." My stomach turned. "From who?" She hesitated. "Neighbors, your pharmacist, even your old mail carrier." I sank into the chair by the window, phone trembling in my hand. "They said..." "What?" She read them off one by one. She often seems disoriented when she picks up prescriptions. She repeated the same story 3 times in one conversation. Sometimes she doesn't recognize me. None of it was true. Not in the way they were suggesting. Yes, I had repeated a story, but it was because the memory meant something to me. Yes, I once forgot my keys in the mailbox, but that happens to everyone. I had no idea my life was being observed through such a cruel lens, or twisted into a case file. Then came the worst part. Rachel cleared her throat. "They also submitted a statement from a financial advisor you apparently saw 5 years ago." I searched my memory. Yes. David insisted I meet with someone after his second son was born. I never hired him. "Well," Rachel said, "he claims you asked him to explain basic checking account functions. Twice." That was a lie. I remember the man, smug, impatient. I left the meeting early because he kept calling me dear. Now his words were being used to prove that I was declining. I felt the walls closing in again, not just emotionally, literally. The house felt smaller, colder. The morning light through the window now seemed clinical, like an interrogation lamp. "They're building a case," I whispered. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We need to respond with everything you've got. Witnesses, logs, audio recordings, calendar entries. Anything to show continuity, clarity, routine." That afternoon I started gathering everything. Every receipt, every note, every voicemail. I called Mrs. Donnelly, my next-door neighbor, the one who sees me walk every morning, rain or shine. She agreed to write a letter. Pastor Reynolds offered to testify. He said, "You remember half the congregation's birthdays better than I do." It helped. A little. But still I couldn't shake the fear. Because I knew what would happen in court. It would be my word against theirs. And I'd already seen whose words were being believed. We had 1 week, 7 days to gather everything I had. Not just paperwork, but proof of life, of presence, of clarity. Rachel came over every evening after work. We sat side by side at the dining room table, covered in folders and notebooks and a worn-out laptop that groaned with every file we opened. She was methodical, relentless. "Think like them," she said. "What would they say? What would they twist?" We reviewed every medical visit I'd had in the last 2 years. No signs of dementia, no cognitive impairment. Blood pressure? Normal. Cholesterol? Controlled. Vision? Corrected with glasses. I printed out a full log of online transactions I'd completed myself. Shopping, bill payments, emails. I even found an old spreadsheet I created to track the twins' birthday gifts. Julie had always forgotten. I never did. We cross-referenced texts, emails, voicemail, timestamps. Every message they sent, every message I answered. I wrote a statement in my own words. Rachel read it, nodded slowly. "It's strong," she said. "Personal, clear." I practiced reading it out loud. The first time, I shook. The second time, I cried halfway through. The third time, I made it to the end. I looked up at Rachel. "Do you think it'll matter?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I think it'll matter to the right people, and that's all we can aim for." I nodded, even though my chest still felt like it was tied in knots. That night, I laid out the blue dress on the bed. I hadn't worn it in years. Not since David's graduation. The fabric still held the scent of lavender from a sachet I'd tucked in the closet long ago. I ironed it carefully, pressing the folds, smoothing out the past. Then I took the silver bracelet from the drawer, wiped it gently. It gleamed under the bedroom light. I would wear both to court, not to look good, but to remember who I am. On the eve of the hearing, I stood in the hallway mirror and rehearsed again. I am not confused. I am not broken. I am not finished. And as I stared into my own eyes, I whispered, I am not theirs to manage. Because tomorrow, everything would be on the record, and I had only one chance to speak my truth before they decided who I'd be for the rest of my life. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the feeling. Sterile walls, wooden benches, a seal of the state above the judge's bench that looked more like a threat than a symbol of justice. I sat at the petitioner's table with Rachel beside me. Calm, composed, a quiet storm in a navy blazer. Across the room, David, Julie, their attorney, crisp suit, polished confidence, a stack of papers at her side that looked taller than mine. The judge entered. Everyone stood. I followed Rachel's lead. When the hearing began, they went first. David took the stand. He didn't look at me once. "I love my mother," he said, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "But I've watched her decline. Little things. Repeating herself. Forgetting names. Leaving bills unpaid." I wanted to scream. None of that was true. Or at least, not in the way he said it. But I had to sit there, silent, professional, controlled. Julie went next. She brought receipts, actual receipts, from times she claimed to have paid my bills for me. She brought a copy of that old prescription bottle I never finished. She showed texts where I'd written the wrong date for a birthday dinner, once. "I'm not saying she's incompetent," Julie said with that same icy smile. "But we've been worried for a while. This is about safety, about love." Love. They were weaponizing it like a shield. Just enough warmth to mask the blade underneath. Their lawyer spoke next, spinning my independence into isolation, my privacy into secrecy, and my routine into rigid confusion. "She has refused assistance. She's withdrawn. She's rejected help. Because I didn't want to be controlled. She's exhibiting signs of early cognitive decline. Because I misread a calendar date. She poses a financial risk to herself and potentially others. Because I protected what's mine." I sat perfectly still, hands folded over the bracelet on my wrist, the metal cool against my skin. Rachel leaned toward me, whispering, "We'll go next. Don't rush. Just speak like you've practiced. You're not on trial. Your voice is." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, because I knew this wasn't just about money, or memory, or safety. This was about whether I would get to be me, or become someone they manage. and I could feel it in the room. The tension, the weight of the silence, everything I said next would matter more than anything I'd said in my entire life. When the judge called my name, the room felt smaller. I stood up slowly, bracelet glinting in the light, blue dress pressing against my skin like a memory come alive. I walked to the stand. Rachel placed a hand on my shoulder, not to steady me, but to remind me, "You're not alone." I sat, took the oath, and met the judge's eyes. "I'm not here because I'm confused," I began, voice quiet but clear. "I'm here because I said no, and they didn't like that." There was a pause, just long enough to feel the shift in the room. I told them everything, how I'd managed my finances for 40 years, how I color-code my bills, how I still balance a checkbook by hand. I listed every online payment I'd made that month, dates, amounts, companies. "I may not remember every birthday off the top of my head," I said, "but I remember the exact day my son had his first fever. I remember the smell of his hair when I rocked him at 3 a.m. I remember the sound of his voice when he called me Mama for the first time. I held up my bracelet. He gave me this when I turned 60. It says, 'You are our strength.' And now they're saying I'm too weak to write a check?" Rachel submitted the folder we'd prepared. Statements from neighbors, the pharmacist who confirmed my clarity, letters from church members who see me every week. Then came Pastor Reynolds. He stood tall, Bible in hand, and said, "If this woman is losing her mind, then I must be a ghost, because she remembers more about the people in our congregation than anyone else." Even Mrs. Donnelly testified. "She walks every morning at 7:15, with purpose, with notes in her pocket, and she still reminds me to take my pills." Rachel submitted the updated medical evaluations. Clean. No signs of cognitive decline. Not one. Then came the part I feared most, the financial breakdown. Rachel calmly walked the judge through a chart comparing my spending habits with those made in my name by David and Julie. Unauthorized withdrawals, duplicate charges, a pattern that, suddenly, didn't point to my mismanagement, but theirs. The courtroom went silent. The judge flipped through the documents, slower now. His eyes moved between the pages, between them and me. Finally, he looked up. "I need a moment to review the material before I make a decision." He stood and left the bench. I exhaled, long and trembling. Rachel leaned close. "No matter what he says, you told your truth." I looked at her, then at David and Julie across the aisle. They wouldn't meet my eyes. For the first time in months, they couldn't. And in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. I hadn't just defended myself. I had reclaimed my name. The judge returned after what felt like hours. Everyone stood again. The silence was unbearable, thick, charged. You could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights, the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats. My heartbeat in my ears. The judge sat, adjusted his glasses, and then he spoke. "I've reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the medical evaluations." He looked directly at David and Julie. "While I understand the concern for Ms. Martin's well-being, concern alone does not justify the removal of a person's autonomy, especially when no legal, medical, or financial grounds support such action." My hands gripped the sides of the chair. "Therefore," he continued, "this court denies the petition for conservatorship. Ms. Martin retains full and exclusive control over her financial, medical, and legal affairs." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The relief was total silence, the kind that fills a soul. I exhaled, not just from my lungs, but from years of invisible weight. My spine straightened, my eyes burned. Then came the rest. This court also finds evidence suggesting misuse of Ms. Martin's finances by the petitioners. A report will be submitted to the appropriate authorities for further investigation. Julie gasped. David's jaw clenched. But they said nothing. They didn't fight. They didn't cry. They just sat, like people who'd gambled and lost more than they realized. When the gavel came down, it echoed like thunder in my chest. Rachel turned to me, smiling, not wide, not victorious, but whole. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, tears finally falling. But they weren't tears of fear. They weren't even tears of anger anymore. They were the tears of someone who had been doubted, dismissed, and nearly erased, but stood up anyway. As we left the courtroom, I passed by David. He looked at me. Not with rage, not with regret, just emptiness. I almost said something, almost asked why, almost begged for the son I remembered. But I didn't, because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine. It's been 6 months since the hearing. My house is quiet again, but this time the silence feels safe. It belongs to me. The locks were changed, the paperwork updated, the bank accounts secured under new passwords only I know. But more importantly, so was my heart. I still wake early. I still walk every morning past Mrs. Donnelly's porch. We wave. Sometimes we sit for coffee. She brings muffins now. I bring peace. I started planting again. The backyard, once ignored and overgrown, is blooming with yellow tulips. I chose yellow for a reason, not because they're my favorite, but because they're a reminder. Brightness can come after long winters. I donated to the elder rights organization Rachel works with. Not much, but enough. I told her, use it for someone like me. Someone who needs someone. We still speak once a week. She always asks if I'm okay. And for the first time in a long time, I can answer truthfully. I'm better than okay. I see the twins occasionally. David drops them off on neutral weekends. It's quiet, polite, strained, but civil. I don't ask for more. Sometimes love has to come with distance. Sometimes boundaries are the only way love can survive at all. I still have the blue dress. I wore it again, not to court, not to church, but to dinner with a group of women from the senior center. We laughed until dessert. We toasted to resilience. I also still wear the silver bracelet, not because of what it used to mean, but because of what I've made it mean now. Strength isn't something they gave me. It's something I reclaimed. I read now. I write. I take long drives through the countryside. I let the windows down. I sing to the radio like I used to when David was small and the world still felt kind. And you know what? I still hope he comes back to me. Not for control, not for convenience, but for truth, for something real. But if he doesn't, I'll be okay. Because I finally remembered who I am, and no one will erase that again. People think that love means saying yes to everything. But sometimes, love means saying no. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw a line. Not out of anger, but out of truth. I didn't stop being a mother the day I said no to David. I stopped being his shadow. And if there's one thing I've learned from this, one truth that has cost me more than I ever thought I'd have to pay, it's this. Limits don't destroy love. They reveal who really loves you. It's not easy. Standing up to your own children, defending yourself against the people you once protected. But silence was never safety, and sacrifice without respect is not love. So now I ask you, the one watching, the one who's maybe lived some version of my story, What would you do if your family tried to take your independence in the name of help? Would you speak up? Would you fight? Would you choose truth, even if it cost you comfort? Because that choice is where everything begins. And if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own mother, or maybe your own silence, I hope you'll do one thing. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part of this felt like you. And if you believe that stories like this matter, stories about dignity, second chances, and the quiet kind of strength, then I invite you to subscribe. There's more to tell, more voices to protect, more truths to share. Thank you for staying with me. And one last question before you go. Have you ever had to forgive someone in your family, even without ever hearing an apology?